for worker ownership, you have to get the current ownership to concede.
Yeah.
You do not have to have the boss's permission to unionize.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Adam, let's play that voicemail that we got last week.
Hey, Adam and Jacob. My name's Austin, and I've been living in Huntsville for a little over 4 years now, and spent a couple of years working at one of the bigger breweries in town, and since moved on from that job. But during my time there, I always hoped I learned about the concept of an employee-owned workplace, and I always hoped that might be something that we may have been able to do while I was there, and it didn't work out. But I've got some friends that still work there, and anyway, I just wanted to ask your opinion on the difference, maybe some of the pros and cons between unionizing a workplace versus pushing for a employee-owned workplace, and I really appreciate what you do, and I hope to hear back from you. Thanks. Bye.
I'm so glad that we got a message along those lines, because something I plan to talk to you about after the show wraps is really getting some guests who can shed light on this exact issue in terms of different models of employee ownership. I think you agree with me, and I know David. We're big fans of worker-owned co-ops. I think cooperatives and I think are really a way to build the kind of economy we want inside the current system. And so someone I would recommend is Richard Wolff. Probably a lot of our listeners are familiar with him, but if you're not, he's a great economist, and he has a show called Economic Update. He has a website and kind of organization, Democracy at Work. So check out Democracy at Work. You can find, that'll kind of get you started down the rabbit hole of worker-owned co-ops, because I think there's so much potential there. And the more that we as working people can pool our resources and basically like pull the plug out from the system as a whole, the more we can work together and not have to rely on capitalists or governments to survive, to thrive, I think that is really the way of the future. That said, Austin touched on an interesting dynamic here in terms of unionizing versus worker ownership. There are different degrees of worker ownership, and some is more legit than others. Some is more or less like, oh, well, you get a little bit of stock options in the company, so therefore we're employee owned, even though you don't have a damn say so at all about how the operations are or the investments of the company. It's kind of an on paper type of thing. So I think it's easy. Some companies are really, just as they have leaned into the talk on diversity, equity, inclusion, some companies have leaned into that, the employee ownership, as just just PR. It's just to slap a nice shiny coat of paint on the same kind of stupid company that they always had and that everybody else in their industry has. So I think there's a lot of danger there. And I would have also seen, and a friend of mine spent some time up in Vermont and has helped me learn about some of the issues there, where you have these co-ops who are employing people and then screwing over the employees, right? So there sometimes are potentials for tension between the co-ops who are and the folks who are owners of the cooperative versus folks who are working for the cooperative, who may or may not, for various reasons, be considered co-op owners. Or maybe they are, but they're outnumbered. Maybe there's enough folks who don't actually do any labor there to kind of outvote them. And so you've seen, what should be democratic cooperative institutions engaging in nefarious labor practices themselves. Now, and all that is before you even get to the big picture of if you're still operating an enterprise in a market economy and ultimately to produce profit, how are you essentially like exploiting yourselves, right? Are you like extracting your own surplus value from your labor, and still engaging in all the things that come with engaging in the marketplace? I think we can be aware of those things while also recognizing still the many benefits that come with it. So, in terms of what should you pick, I think those are. That really would just be a case-by-case kind of basis, and I think there's nothing stopping some aspect of both, really. I mean, why not unionize with the goal of eventually taking over the company? Or if it looks like, for whatever reason, you're sort of closer down that road, push on the employee ownership side to recognize a union and enshrine collective bargaining agreements. I think the two can work hand in hand, really.
Right.
And that's why something I'm interested in, and hopefully we'll have some more content on the show so we can learn more about these two paths and how they can relate to each other, how they can build off each other, and how ultimately in the longer view, we as working class people can start to put our resources there. And because wouldn't it be nice if like all of your shopping, all of your consumption, quote unquote, could really be funneled into enterprises that were either union shops or co-ops, or some combination of the two. I think building that economy, I think Richard Wolff maybe speaks of it as the solidarity economy. And I know he had a great interview a while back. Let's see, Humboldt Institute, I believe. Some folks affiliated with the Green Party working with indigenous tribes up in the Northwest, building a whole community around cooperatives and worker ownership. So there's a lot of really exciting stuff out there. It's not talked about a lot, and so I think it's still relatively new in some ways and still relatively small in other ways. But then there's stuff that's been around our communities for a long, long time. Talk to any farmer, they know about a co-op. So I'm glad to get a voicemail on that subject. It's just a good reminder that we need to dive deeper into that that field and get some experts who can come on and educate us about this. Yeah.
I mean, I think that what should you do, unionize or do a worker co-op? I mean, like.
That's so specific.
Becoming obviously the devil is in the details when you're talking about worker co-ops. Like you said, some versions are better than others, but assuming that we're talking about a truly democratic and a truly worker-owned enterprise where workers own and workers run the business, if you're talking about converting a current business to a worker-owned co-op, the hitch that you're going to find there is that you've got to get the boss to agree to it.
Right.
Right. And so that whatever, more power to you and more power to the person who owns the enterprise. If you can actually get the boss to cede his control, like if you have that sort of personal leverage and you feel that the person individually is that type of person that he would relinquish his control and ownership in the enterprise, that would be great. And I think Adam and I would both love to see that, because as opposed to
get in on it. Hell, I mean, I'm very much interested, and I think I speak for most of us in any way affiliated with this show, that we would all be excited to see more democratic, worker-owned cooperative type shops, enterprises, industries, whatever you want to call it, anything moving in that direction here in North Alabama or the Tennessee Valley, I think would be fantastic, and would love to collaborate on that.
Right. But like I said, the hitch there is that for worker ownership, you have to get the current ownership to concede.
Yeah.
You do not have to have the boss's permission to unionize. And in fact, in almost every instance, you will not have the boss's permission. And so, you know, we see how even progressive companies, quote unquote, and organizations fight against even unionization, which is not worker ownership. So I would feel pretty confident betting my money that whatever brewery you worked at or your friends work at currently, the boss will not concede to turning it into a worker co-op, and they would oppose any unionization effort. But the good thing about unionization is that you don't need their permission. All you need is the solidarity of your sisters and brothers on the job. And then once you unionize and you start working on your contract, one of the things that you can do, which in the labor movement, we don't talk enough about, I don't think, is you can put into your contract that any sort of ownership change has to give the workers the first right of refusal. Meaning that if and we see this all the time, that bosses go bankrupt, bosses want to sell their company to a bigger corporation, whatever, you know, we see it all the time, and they don't even have to consult their workers on it, much less tell their workers like, oh, hey, would you be interested in buying this enterprise at market rate? Like, would you be interested in it? They don't have to consult them on it. They don't have to offer it to them. They don't have to do any of that. And you could, because you can put anything in a contract. You can put anything in a contract. And so you could, as a union, as your sisters and brothers on the job, you could fight for that to be in your contract and say, look, boss man, if you ever are interested in changing the ownership, if you're ever interested in going bankrupt, you have to say to us, the union, to us, the workers, you can buy it if you want. You can buy the business if you want. So that is something. What would be better? Full worker ownership and control. I think that would obviously be preferable. But what is more achievable and what can actually lead to the former, I think, is unionization.
Yeah,
so those are some of my thoughts on it.
I'm so glad you mentioned the right of first refusal. I was going to bring that up myself. And back a couple years back, you know, when we saw Jeremy Corbyn and sort of the left wing of the Labor Party take power, however briefly, in the party, that was part of their platform. That was part of their plank. But in this case, it would have been, you know, nationwide, any business that was planning to go out of business, to close up, or just simply sell.
And I think that makes sense as a law. That doesn't even like violate any sort of property rights regime.
It's not saying you have to.
Yeah.
Not even saying, you know, that's necessarily always going to work.
And not even saying that the workers want it. Like, what if some of the workers like don't want to buy it?
Right.
Like, okay, that's still an option.
Yeah, they may see this as just like, hey, I'm just doing this for a little while. It's not. I'm not going to make a life out of it, or I don't want to put, you know, that kind of investment forward. But yeah, it's all really fascinating stuff. Mr. Anderson in the comments mentioned where you can have, you know, consumer-owned or maybe like neighborhood-owned type businesses where the employees themselves are unionized. And so, again, there's kind of both going on. He gave the example of a community-owned grocery store where, and, you know, so maybe the community, the neighborhood, there is some sort of democratic ownership structure there where everybody has a piece in the operations and the ownership of the grocery store. Meanwhile, whoever goes to work for the store could be unionized and, you know, negotiate with the board or governing structure of the grocery store. I think those types of things we need so much more of, and really I think there's a lot of opportunities here for labor to move in this direction and collaborate with each other, because we aren't capitalists. We don't have capital. We don't have enough money to just go out and buy properties like this.
And if you're interested in supporting something like that, the Bank of Labor is a really, really cool thing. They are owned by the operating engineers, I think, and their employees are represented by, I believe, the Teamsters.
The mine workers.
The mine workers. That's right. Their employees are represented by the mine workers.
Shout out to David Story. I had no idea. I
The machine. Yeah,
Never heard of them. And
They're
David
great.
Stories, how I learned about that.
The Machinists Local 44 and their state council use the Bank of Labor. The North Alabama Labor Council uses the Bank of Labor. The Huntsville Industrial Workers of the World uses the Bank of Labor. The only reason that our show hasn't switched to the Bank of Labor is because we've got like 1,000 checks with our Redstone Federal Credit Union on it. So I want to use all those checks because we spent good money on them because they're union printed checks. Did you know that you can get union printed checks? You can, and we have them. So, anyway, the Bank of Labor, look it up. Good stuff.
And Austin and your friends, we need a cooperatively owned, worker-run brewery in North Alabama. We need cooperatively owned, worker-run,
Bookstores.
lots of things. Maybe just the whole world. But short of that, I think there's a lot of opportunities, and it would be a great thing to do here in North Alabama. Something I've learned from Professor Wolf is, I believe in Italy, and perhaps some other European countries, but definitely in Italy, part of their unemployment laws and unemployment insurance system is that if you have multiple workers who are unemployed, they can actually more or less like pool their unemployment checks and get support to start a co-op. So, yeah, if you and 5 or 6 other folks get laid off at your place of business, and, you could draw unemployment while you're searching for other work, or in this system, you and your 5 or 6 friends who just got laid off with you, y'all can all come together, devise a plan, and actually get some support from the state there to start your own co-op. That's not a radical measure. It's not like Italy is a paradise and doesn't have many of the same issues we have. But here we go. Here's a real-life example of how just a slight little tweak in the law, slight little changes in the way we think about things and invest in things can provide whole new opportunities for the way we operate. So great stuff. I could talk about that all day, and I'm looking forward to really learning more about this.
Yeah. We have talked to the people from The Appeal.
Yes.
The Appeal, they went to a worker-run
media.
Worker-run media. They don't own it, but they run it. They have like investors or something. And we interviewed them as they were going through that process. So that's something that you could go back and look at.
And our friends at Means TV are really trying to blaze a trail along those lines, but for a media platform and the idea being kind of like a worker-owned co-op Netflix. I know we talked to some of our wobbly sisters down in Florida. I forget the name of the restaurant there, but when we did our series of IWW interviews, I know that in one of those cases, some of those sisters were actually going to start their own co-op food service.
Oh, I forgot what it was called.
Yeah, so I haven't heard anything from them. So I don't know if they're still doing that project. If they are, definitely want to see that. But I think we have to think outside the box as labor folks, and especially in a country and in a state where so few folks do belong to unions or even have a realistic chance of seeing a union. So many folks, it just seems so far off, like, yeah, it's a great idea, but like it'll never happen where I work, or maybe they're in a weird, maybe they're gig workers or freelance, whatever the situation may be. I think that's got to be a tool in our toolbox that we combine and supplement with we have to have the focus of organizing workplaces and organizing workers and building a strong, robust labor movement. And I think it all just goes hand in hand.
Absolutely. You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.